This is Words Aptly Spoken, which comes from Proverbs 25:11. The word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in settings of silver. The written word is a precious treasure. We want to preserve written knowledge for God's glory and as an anchor to the history of the church and its classical conversations. We hope to encourage the reading of words and of the word.
Welcome to Words Aptly Spoken, where Jennifer Courtney, Timothy Knotts, and I discuss books from the Classical Conversations curated curriculum. Today is Wednesday, June 5th, 2024, and I'm Lee Bortons. We also have with us today Brittany Lewis, curriculum developer for Classical Conversations Multimedia, and we look forward to hearing from you later, Brittany. But for now, Jennifer, tell us about this month's show or shows are entering a whole new season.
Yeah, so this month we're going to be talking about elements from different levels of our curriculum that are also very, very helpful as parent resources. And if we want to group them into a category, they are basically things that help us reason and think well and things that help us communicate well. So today we're going to talk about tour guide debate, and then we'll look at the fallacy detective, the consequences of ideas, and notes from a tilt-a-whirl.
Do you think that you can communicate effectively if you can't think effectively?
I don't think so.
Well, thanks for the introduction to what we'll be talking about. And everyone, you can access this as well as other past episodes of Words Aptly Spoken on my YouTube channel at Lee Bortons, or you can go to leebortons.com where you can see the 2023 and 2024 archives and calendar of upcoming books we'll be discussing. So I look forward to just hearing your feedback. All right, Jennifer, let's get started.
Okay, well, I'm going to back up one level from my normal question, and I'm first going to ask you why we do debate in classical conversations, and then why we're using this resource, Tour Guide Introduction to Debate. So,
thanks. So, and debate takes many forms, and most Americans, or probably most of our audience, is wherever they live, are used to seeing what's called a debate on TV between politicians. It's really not a debate. It's more an opinion fest and sometimes turns into a free-for-all. And so not just in our kind of a title debates like Lincoln Douglas debates and teen policy debates, but in all our forensic events, what we're trying to do is show students that there's a form to an argument, and there's a variety of forms. And so debate, mostly the introduction book that we're looking at today talks about policy debates. It's just an actual form that people in power used to use, and it would be really nice to see it come back. And it won't come back if we don't teach children how to use it and appreciate it. I know I'm in the middle right now of planning a debate among some radio and TV hosts who are interested in educational issues. And we're actually using the team policy debate form with a couple of modifications, and because we want it to be scholarly. We want to hear our definitions and actually know what the arguments are and then what conclusions we could come to. So why is the book in? Well, we needed help with that. The parents, even me, as old as I am, when I first started debating with my children, I didn't know there were forms to debates or what they were. So I need somebody to introduce them to me. And, the form and the introduction part of it is actually easy. The performing is very difficult. And so it's nice to start young with the students and teaching them just the form, whether they're successful or not at the debate. And then, of course, they have that opportunity to become successful in persuading people if they learn the proper forms. And the other thing that we get out of debate is this a really intense listening exercise. So just like we listen really carefully to classical music in our foundations curriculum, as well as in our Challenge Western Civ curriculum, now we're listening to words and arguments in a way where note-taking is really important. And of course, all of that gets practiced in the church, like everything that we do should be. So it helps our children learn how to take notes when they're listening to the pastor's sermon. So there's a lot of reasons that both formal and informal debates are part of the Classical Conversations curriculum.
Yeah, I've appreciated our recent conversations about how debate helps us to listen. And I got to see this in action with my daughter's challenge one class this year where they didn't listen very well in their first debate. They were too busy thinking about what to say, but by the second debate, they actually were really listening. And you could tell because the questions they asked one another in cross-examination actually related to what the other person had said, which showed me that they were listening better. But I wanted to give you a moment to respond, Lee, because I suspect that listening part of formal debate is one way you say we're not using that form when we have politicians come on and speak on news shows today, for example.
Yeah, they come with prepared speeches, and then maybe they're asked a question by a moderator instead of coming with a prepared speech. There's nothing wrong with having a prepared speech, but with the speech's intention of being challenged and time to go back and forth over the arguments, to not just be heard, have people clap and move on to the next point.
Yeah, that's good. And also you can tell in press conferences and hearings, the follow-up question will often let you know if they were listening or not. Sometimes the follow-up questions are not at all related to what the person just said, which tells you that they came with their list of questions. So the person has a prepared speech and then people have prepared questions and they're not really having a discussion.
Right. And so the thing that we've all learned over these 20 some years being in classical conversations is it's hard enough for adults to listen, let alone children. So when parents might be frustrated that their children aren't able to listen to the debate forms that we practice, we just need to remind them that's normal. It's really quite hard to listen to a extensive argument for a number of minutes and think about your own questions while you're holding those ideas. We do it all the time though when we read books. And so we have that analogous experience where we wait to decide, do we like our book or not, till we see how it ends. Well, we need to learn how to listen to an argument and decide whether we agree or disagree after we've heard how it ends. And so listening is a good part of that too.
Yeah, that's good. All right. So Tim, you write our debate strand resources in CCMM. So tell us about how this resource, the Tour Guide Introduction Debate, gets used by students.
Yeah. Lee, I think one other thing that the politicians often do is when they get asked those questions, they say, well, that's a good question, but I'd like to talk about, and they totally talk about something entirely different. And then they get away with it, which boggles my mind that no one challenges them on that. But yeah, to be clear, this was not one of my brain children. This book, it predates my time with classical conversations. But certainly glad to talk about what it is and how we use it. The tour guide is an attempt to, I think, find a middle road between a resource that tells you all about a thing and something that shows you what something is. So it does give instructions and it does give descriptions of the parts of debate and a lot of the vocabulary that comes along with it. And debate has a lot of vocabulary. It also has a lot of names for the structures and parts of the arguments and of the debate itself. But it doesn't just tell students, and you have to know this, and you have to know that, and here's a definition for this. But instead, it shows those pieces along with some actual debate elements as they're fleshed out, but in a simpler form. So, or not a simpler form, but with simpler content. So the form is all there, and it's used with some easy to understand content that hopefully doesn't distract students from being able to sort of see past the content of the debate and into the form of the debate. This way of teaching it is a little uncomfortable at first because it feels like you're wading into the middle of something, but it's with a little bit of perseverance and a little bit of time of going through it, it's actually a very happy middle road. It does both showing and telling, and so with some time, it's a big help to students to both come to understand the forms of the debate, and the vocabulary of the debate, and get a little bit of a taste of what the whole of debate is instead of just the parts.
Okay, I'm going to ask some follow-up questions, Tim, to make sure I digested everything you said and harmonize it with my use of this resource. So One way that we teach kids in this book to understand the form is literally just to have them practice standing up in the order of the speeches that they would be giving based on their role. So there's no content at all. That's just the form. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's one way that we practice the form. Yep.
Okay. And then we practice, one layer is practicing content on silly debates, like whether or not we should sing Christmas carols before Thanksgiving.
Right. Or whether cats or dogs are better.
Yes. Okay, good. So that's helpful. And then where you're saying it might be uncomfortable is at some point they have to leap in and do an actual debate.
Right. Right. It's uncomfortable that way. At
Mhm.
some point, everyone will be uncomfortable having to get up to do a debate, no matter how they try to learn it. But I think I would say it's a little uncomfortable because we are used to learning one way or the other way by being either told everything and then have to piece it together and try and work it out ourselves in how it looks and feels, or we learn things by watching someone do something and then trying to imitate them. And this book does some of each, which again helps because some people learn a little more readily in one of those modes, and some people learn a little better the other way. Some things are better taught the first way, and some things are better taught the second way. And so this one does both things at the same time, which will make everyone a little uncomfortable, but then give a rounder view of what debate is.
Yeah, that's good. And we should mention that one way we show debate with this is that there are some videos of students doing debates that are available on the Classical Conversation CC Connected site, where you can see actual students, and there are some subtitles to help you as the viewer know which part of the debate they're in, or if they made an error or something like that. That kind of guides you through. Good. I know my son was actually an NCFCA debater, and so we got thrown in the deep end the first year that he debated. And he was 13, and some of the debaters were 18 and had been doing it for years. So he literally got thrown in, but it was good because he got to imitate them and get better at it. The first year was probably best described as a train wreck. It was just learning the form and getting over the nerves. And then he really wasn't able at that stage of the game to respond to actual arguments. He was just trying to command himself, get over the nerves, and follow the form. And that's okay. He
Yeah.
got better.
I think most of us, when we try new things, especially complicated sets of skills, like the first time you try to ride a bicycle, it's usually a train wreck, or at least a bicycle wreck, because you haven't quite figured out the starting and the pedaling and the balancing and the steering all at the same time. And that's a little bit what your first full debate is like. You're trying to listen and prepare to respond and keep all of your ideas that are your arguments in your head and flow and work with your teammates. There's a lot of different skills involved all at once.
You know, one thing it's like is an impromptu play. So if you're going to do a play, one of the first things you do with the director is you don't run through your lines. You run through the blocking and the timing, and nobody needs to say anything. They just need to be what they're supposed to be, ready in case, there was something that should come out of their mouth. And that's part of the beginning of the debate instruction. And a lot of families want to jump right into the end, not recognizing that you need to break it up into little steps. But if you keep practicing those steps, our system is about every 5th week, they have some sort of part of the debate to do. That eventually they will get there. So that's why I appreciate what you said about the book, is that we're doing with some easy content so that the form and that blocking can be practiced. And then they do all those hard things you just listed eventually.
Yeah. And one of the things I appreciated just as parent experiences, I had, like most people, I had 4 kids. Some of them loved debate and public speaking, and some of them hated it. And of course, over the years, the ones who hated it begged me to get out of the assignments, and I never did give in. And one of my children, it wasn't until her final year in Classical Conversations that she grew into herself, I guess, grew into the material. I'm not entirely sure what happened, but in her final debate in CC, so that would have been 8 semesters into practicing debate, she finally just got it all together and really knocked it out of the park. And we were all so grateful as a family that we persevered and had patience to wade through the times when it felt like we weren't making progress. because that final hurdle was so rewarding for her to have that capstone on her education and really be affirmed by her people in community who saw that transformation. So if that encourages anyone.
Yeah, so before we get to Brittany, I know we're leaving you out, but you used an acronym that families may not be familiar with, Jennifer, CF.
Oh, CFCA. Yeah.
What's it stand for?
Yeah, so we have two major debate organizations that our student that homeschool students participate in. One is NCFCA, which is National Christian Forensics and Communications Association. And then the other one is STOA, which I'm going to forget what it stands for. Do you know, Tim?
It doesn't stand for anything. It's a word.
Okay.
It's a Greek
Not an
word.
Okay, that's right. It's a Greek word. So we have those two opportunities. So we've had many students in CC over the years participate in one or other of those and go on to competitive speech and debate.
So kind of a side story that's part of the CC history is that when all of this started, the pioneers of homeschooling, we were debating through HSLDA, Homeschool Legal Defense Association. And the Lord has just been so good to help classical conversations be supported by the homeschooling community. And one of the ways he did that was our first debate team from CC went up to Patrick Henry, which did not exist at the time. We met in a nearby building, and our students were there when Mike Ferris and I put our foot on the shovel that opened up the building of Patrick Henry. And of course, Dr. Ferris has been a good friend, and not just CC, but homeschoolers and classical education. And so it was just really important to me, those beginning years of CC, to partner with everybody that we could see doing well by our children and having expectations that you can do it no matter how hard it is. So of course, now we have opportunities globally for our children to debate, as well as more and more universities are opened up to both team kind of debates and mock trials, which we also do. So it doesn't end at CC. It can continue through your children's young adult years when they actually have a chance to be proficient.
Yeah, that's a good word, Lee. I love thinking about our partners. And in fact, I know Tim and our own Lisa Bailey have done some webinars in partnership with STOA this year. So we still have those good relationships. Good. Well, Brittany, one of the things that's a little bit different about classical conversations, because we're not a school, we're a homeschooling community. And so that means that all of our resources aren't just used by the students, they get used by the parents too. And I know you're one of those parents who has really spent the last 2 decades diving in with both feet. So talk to us about how parents use the tour guide debate.
Well, I remember the book we used before this one, which was really hard for me as a newbie to debate. So I didn't know anything about formal debate at all as a parent. And so trying to help guide my group of students in challenge one and help my son learn how to do that while I was also learning. This book has been a much better guide, an easier entry point for me into learning what formal debate is. And we know that our kids imitate us. And so it's helped me not only learn formal debate structures and to listen better to others and to practice courteous argumentation, it's also helped me remember the spirit of debate. It's one of my favorite parts of this book that was missing from the other book, aside from the clear presentation we have that is tailor fit for our families. I really loved Lee's introduction and the spirit of debate section, where she talks about holding these things in, I guess, the place where they should be, instead of being knockout, drag out competitions or really intense competitive debate like our students can participate in. I've been thankful for the reminder of the bigger picture of what we're doing, and also how this is a opportunity to celebrate each other as the body of Christ in community, as we cheer on and are encouraging our teammates on the other side of an argument if they perhaps do better than we did in our first tries or in our last try. And then also having the opportunity to just reason together, to listen to one another, and to find the truth together. I've had classes of students be able to recognize that in each other, and the opportunity as a parent at home to know what we're doing, know what's required, coach my students along the way, sit next to my kids and engage in really good conversations, and then watch them progress as we both learn what formal debate is and what argumentations ought to be. And that's just been a real gift to me as a parent.
I mean, the thing you said I'm most thankful for is when you opened up and said, well, for about 20 years I've been. Thank you for not giving up and for loving all your children the whole way through to the bitter end. And it's just, it's so easy in this day and age where we don't have cultural support for good, strong parenting. So I just appreciate that you stayed in there and that you're here with us on our team.
Oh, thank you so much. I just want to say that I really believed you a long time ago on your Lee at Lunch specials when you would say that I was a smart mama and that I could do it. So thank you. Thanks for casting the vision for both generations at once. And this book is a good reflection of an effort to meet those goals. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate what you said too, Brittany, that our students do imitate us. And so if they saw your kiddos and your challenge students saw you digging in and learning alongside them, that makes a huge amount of difference that you were willing to learn the form of debate and get better at it and know that it was a long-term process. We've been talking a lot about just that we do imitate our masters. And so as we look at debate, one of the things we can think about is that there's a lot of online education opportunities, and you can't really debate with a machine. You can't wrestle toward truth together. These are some fundamental things that we want to hold on to in classical conversations. The mentoring of parents who are physically sitting in the room with their children at home and in community, and also just that wrestling with truth together. And that's part of what we do in debate. So,
yeah, I think it's also a great opportunity for parents whose children aren't involved in sports to have some of the important conversations about competition and what does it feel like to lose even when you've worked hard, or sometimes to win when you didn't work very hard, or or when you have feelings that you weren't treated fairly by somebody who is making decisions. There are a lot of things that go on with debate that reflect the kind of competitiveness and sports attitudes that a lot of students will wrestle with in that venue, but may not if they don't play sports. So this is a good avenue for some great parenting conversations there.
Good reminder, Tim.
Yeah, that's very good. And I will say back to your point about the spirit of debate in the intro, Brittany, that I had a community of young men, one of whom was my son, and they were not in the proper spirit one year. And so at the end of the debate, when they asked me who won, I said, I'm not going to answer you today. You guys are in no frame of mind for that conversation. So what you're going to do instead is assess your own arguments. And then I'm going to let each team assess the other team. And it was a really interesting exercise where the one team said, well, if you had said this, you could have destroyed our argument. And so it turned out to be a really good, a good day. I didn't know that was going to happen. I was just trying to get them to be kind to one another. So anyway, well, I think we have to talk about the elephant in the room, which I think is an experience all of us on this call have had. When you teach your children about fallacies or you teach them about debate, they're going to start arguing with you. So how do we handle that? Why should we let them argue? How do we help them do this well? What are your thoughts? You want to start us off, Lee?
Sure. So I have grown children. They're all approaching 30 and 40 years old. And I see the results of their classical education when they argue with me, and we argue. And just the respect that they give me and the ability that they have, to listen. And so when they were younger and maybe less mature and they argued with you, well, they were less mature. But we still want to give them those opportunities to argue more dispassionately, more with some rules, because most of our arguments throughout life we're probably more passionate about. And so this gives them practice to do it when it really doesn't matter, because they're not necessarily in these academic debates. They do want to win. That's absolutely true. But they also know it's not going to change their basketball team or their ability to get their driver's license, things like that. It's not earth shattering to them. Because as they get older, there's going to be opportunities to argue with the insurance agent or the, or your spouse or an employer, and you need to do it very responsibly and civilly, and as a witness unto the Lord, and things that you believe that He would have you say. So, all of us do things badly when we first start, so it shouldn't surprise us that our children argue with us badly. We should go, well done, good try, but you're not winning.
Yeah, we
I
have
agree.
Oh, go
Go
ahead. No, go, Brittany.
I was just thinking about just all the great conversations we've had at home, wrestling over these things, and then often wrestling with the topic of the debate, with the resolutions. We thought we believed one thing, and by the end of the debate, we were convinced of the other side multiple times. It was really great to practice on some things that didn't personally, we didn't have that much invested in it personally. That's been a huge, I think, aha moment for all of us, for my husband, for me, for each of my children. We can look back at certain debates that my kids have done and said, oh, we realize that there's good reasons on both sides, and we really do need to listen to each other, and we really do need to examine our own arguments and beliefs first before we start trying to pull apart the other argument on the other side. That's been a great opportunity for that.
Yeah. And the truth of the matter is that whether you teach your kids to argue or not, they're going to argue. They're going to argue with you. Isn't it better that they argue with you in a way that makes some sense and you can follow what they're thinking and what they're saying and see where either you can see where they're wrong and you can help them to see that, or you can hear that they're right and you can change what you were thinking or doing because they've brought up a valid point and you should be listening to them. I think that's the way, Lee, that you're right, that they can be respectful to you, but you can also be respectful to them in the way of not just dismissing them because they're arguing, but to say, okay, but show me what you mean. Show me why you're right.
That's why I found that really easy to do would be when they just really liked a movie or they really liked a book or they really were into a certain musician. And, if I asked them why, they knew that there was some definitions and explanations and some sort of context that they had to answer in, because going through the 5 common topics classically, as well as the debate process, that's just what was expected of them throughout the school year. So it's not just having, we put the easy content in this book, but the reality is a lot of the stuff they're going to be discussing with children, it's easy content. So it's a good place to begin for that reason too.
Yeah. One of the things that my youngest instituted at our dinner table, now that she's the only one home, she loves to set up debates between me and my husband. And so she'll give us a topic and assign us either to be the affirmative or the negative. It's a very abbreviated form. She just allows us to state our reasons and ask a couple of questions. She's come up with her own form, but I think it's fascinating the way she's using that to learn more and see more examples of forming arguments. And I think she likes controlling what we're doing at the dinner table. So it's kind of fun for us all. All right.
Yeah, your Mia is so smart.
Well, she's
I
learned
like her
from all of her older siblings. It's great in some ways to be the youngest in a homeschool family because you get to learn a lot in advance.
Yeah, and all those years that you put that your oldest had your attention because they were the oldest gets made up for when that baby's the last one. In some ways, I think it's almost better years because they're almost an adult while you have that time with them.
Yeah, that's great. All right, well, I think it's time to thank our sponsors so that we can get into our close reading. So Leah, I'll hand it back to you.
All right. So thanks to Classical Conversations books.com, where the books discussed can be purchased. We have the entire 2023 Words Aptly Spoken calendar at leebortons.com with links to the Classical Conversations book site, as well as the 2024 calendar and our upcoming discussions. And that's a good time to remind you that next week, if you want to purchase it, we'll be discussing The Fallacy Detective. And that's a really popular book with the middle school students. It really is approachable to them, versus maybe this debate book is more for the parent tutor to try to help the child get to a certain location, a certain ability. The Fallacy Detective meets them closer to where they are. So it'll be good to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, now is the time that we do some close reading, some talking about quotations directly from the resource. So the introduction, as Brittany mentioned, has some really good exhortations about debate to get started on the right foot. So on the first page of the introduction is a quotation from one of our favorites, David Hicks, who has written the lovely book, Norms and Nobility. And he says this: debate teaches not only the felicities of speech, but an intellectual courtesy and honesty, as well as poise and confidence in address that splendidly dramatize the union between the idea and the deed. Has a lot of big words. So how does Hicks think we should think about debate? Do you guys have thoughts?
I looked up the word felicities because I wanted to know if it was specific to language itself, and it is. In Merriam-Webster, it said a pleasing manner of quality, especially in art or language. So debate teaches not only a pleasing manner or quality of speech, but an intellectual courtesy and honesty. So that was helpful to me.
When you used the word courtesy earlier, Brittany, when you were describing your children's behavior in debate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's right. It's
okay.
an opportunity to live that out. I mean, someone said once, I don't know who said it, that there was a wrong way to be right. I think this is an opportunity to practice that.
That's really
I
good.
think there's something about learning the mastery of the skills of debate. It may not be becoming a master debater that is the goal, but the practice of being able to stand and present a case and to do it with confidence and to do it with respect and to do it with some conviction about that you know what you're talking about, that you have backup, that it's not just your opinion, that it's not just you're not asking someone for something, you're telling them something and something that's worth hearing. I think those only come across in honesty when it's what he says, the union between the idea and the deed. I think students who don't feel like they own the material never can deliver, right? That last of the cannons. They can't stand and deliver with the kind of confidence and poise that's required because their ideas aren't there yet. So it's that great combination of being equipped with all the right knowledge, the dialectic, as well as the rhetoric to deliver it.
Yeah, and I think that's a good word for us as people who assess debates. So I've spent a lot of years now assessing debates with students, both in CC community and in some of those outside organizations we mentioned. And it is a place, this quotation reminds me of the importance of growing as an assessor also, because it's very easy to take the confidence of the student and let that be the only thing. And so I've often seen judges do that, where the student who speaks the most confidently is the student who wins. And it's a good reminder to us to be looking for that harmony of the idea, as well as the mode of delivery. So good. All right, Brittany, do you want to read us the next part of it? Oh, sorry.
So the student who just has a beautifully graphic, well laid out science fair project, but you can tell they didn't go do any research. So there was no experimentation behind it. And so we can err on that side very easily. Presentation, especially in this day and age, means so much more to our culture than the ideas behind the presentation. And so that's a struggle we have as a country, probably globally. And so I really appreciate when our children are taught to break down the ideas and find the substance behind it or lack of it.
That's good. We may all be returning to more primitive things soon, like handwritten papers. That's one way to know that our students did it and not AI. All right, Brittany, do you want to read us the next section from the intro?
Sure. So often, debaters are required to argue a position with which they do not agree. Learning all viewpoints helps us form better arguments for our actual beliefs, as it forces us to think beyond inflammatory rhetoric and form cohesive arguments based on the real opinions of those who think differently. Too often in arguments today, we fail to listen to the other side. We come into an argument determined to beat down the other person with our arguments. This carries the risk that we are not even responding to their actual arguments. Instead, we should come in open to listening carefully to the arguments of another before responding. These skills are very helpful in sharing the gospel. Until a person is heard and loved, it is hard for them to respect a new point of view. So good.
Yeah. I think that was good for my children to be forced to argue against what they thought they believed. So sometimes it really did not change their mind, and that's okay too. But sometimes they hadn't really thought it through. So they were vehemently disagreeing with something that they hadn't really thought through all the ramifications. But even if they ended up still not agreeing with the side they debated for, they were able to think about how people on the other side were thinking about it. And that led them to be more courteous and harmonious with their neighbors.
Oftentimes, when you disagree with somebody, they've thought it through and they have really good ideas and they're not intentionally mean people. What I find tends to be the difference is they don't know where their presuppositions came from, and they don't really know the sphere of influence their ideas are like appropriate in. And so by trying to figure out, like sometimes parents will push back and say, but my child doesn't want to be on the pro-abortion side. And we're like, well, they're not on the pro-abortion side. They're trying to learn the arguments of wonderful men and women who really love their families and then do something that we just think is so vile. Let's try to figure out why they do that. Then maybe we have a chance of actually reaching them. But if we hear the pain that they're in and give them a solution, they're just going to think we're mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that that last little bit of the first part that Brittany read, where it says to form cohesive arguments based on the real opinions of those who think differently. You know, we tend to, we all do it, and our culture accepts it, to caricature other people's arguments or to erect a straw man or to turn their argument into a red herring when it wasn't really. So pairing these fallacies that students learn about, we're going to look at them next week in our fallacy detective discussion, but to be careful to avoid perverting the real arguments of our opponents into something that they weren't in the first place. Because it's dishonest. It's dishonest to them. It's also dishonest to ourselves because we're not really wrestling with the ideas anymore. We're just trying to win the argument. And that's what the cautions here are about and are really, really important. You know, again, if you don't master the debate form, that's a far smaller loss than walking away being a master debater, in the sense that you can win all the debates, but never actually confront the truth of the arguments of the other side.
Yeah, that's good. Well, goes to that argument, Jennifer, Courtney here and I have repeatedly over the years that, because I'm a big person to really emphasize the form over the content, and she'll say, yes, but we have to have the good content or the form becomes abusive. And so you need both. And so I appreciate how you worded that, Tim.
One of my kids said, I think their fellow students, they had a debate, and at the end, one of the teams said to the other team, I'm really sorry that I attacked you personally. I realize I did that because I did not do enough research.
Oh, wow.
And so I just fell to that. And that moment was so valuable to them as friends, learning together that the other person was honest enough to say that. And that the student could say, oh, I'm prone to do that too, and recognize that in herself later on too.
This is a good segue to let listeners who aren't in CC know that what we're referring to is a number of events where you're in a team or working with somebody else in these arguments. We have lots of other opportunities where as a single person, you present your ideas. So for those of you that are wondering who they're referring to, so whether it's like a Socratic circle where you're listening to another team, or a one-on-one Lincoln Douglas debate where the other students are listening to you, or a two-on-two policy debate, there's other people paying attention to these arguments, even though we are in communities of just handfuls of students.
Yeah. Good. And it takes a certain skill for the students too to engage in the right material. So this last debate that my daughter did, their challenge one director is very brave. He's a pastor, and he let them suggest their own debate topics, and they really wanted to argue over whether or not the production and sale of tobacco products should be banned in the US. And I thought this is a dangerous resolution, because my thought was that they were not going to be able to argue about the sale and manufacture. They were going to argue over whether smoking is good or bad. And they didn't. They really impressed me. They stayed to the resolution and looked at historical precedent and what is the role of the government in regulating personal lifestyle choices. And they really engaged in the actual resolution. So then I was glad he let him do it. So
They
good.
rise.
Do it.
They rise.
Yes, they do. They do.
Yeah, they do.
So Tim, we've talked a little bit about this idea of assessing and having judges. So I thought maybe you could talk to us or read a little bit from the player's role about the purpose of having judges for our debates and classical conversations.
Yeah, this is a good and important section to distinguish again between sort of these professional style debate clubs and what we do in ZC. It says, during this debate, the judge should take good notes while listening carefully to each speaker. The first responsibility of the judge is not to declare winners and losers. It is to provide feedback that will help both teams improve. The judge should provide verbal or written assessment of research and evidence, lines of argument, questions and answers, persuasiveness, and public speaking skills. It is not necessary to use a specific competition and judges form unless you are preparing students to be competitive. The judges forms are more often used when persons from outside the group need a form of assessment for competition. We will not address judges forms in this book, since competitive debate is not the main point of this booklet, and since forms vary by organization. Our policy debate judges should take the same view as our Father in heaven. He is pleased with our best as we take the forms he gives us and fill them with appropriate, honoring content. Our assessment should not be used to say, you were better than he was. Instead, they should inform the students what the judge was persuaded and pleased by and what could be improved.
So Brittany, I know you've assessed a lot of students over the years. I'd love to hear what you think about being the judge, because you've been in that seat many times.
Yeah, I'm grateful that we have this exhortation in here, because it's fun when we get to know our students to watch them progress in this skill, especially if whether they're really naturally good at it or whether it's just a beast to conquer. It's wonderful to be able to help coach them. And as a judge, as a tutor, you have an opportunity to remember what your students' last debate was like, what their struggles were, and to be able to encourage them in that. And I think that's really the most important thing. Students and sometimes parents and sometimes tutors want to make it all about the winning. And there's nothing wrong with a little competition, but the most important thing is that we are progressing in our ability to have courteous argumentation, to practice that courteous argumentation with each other and to grow in those public speaking skills. So that's what I'm thinking about when I hear this. I was also thinking about it's two things. I mean, like, we're looking at debate, the skill of debate. We're also looking at rhetoric too, as students practice persuading each other to truth. And so depending on where you are as a judge and your understanding of those things, it's great to be pointed back to what did each group do well, and where could they be more persuasive to you.
Yeah, and I really appreciated what you said about the nature of classical conversations debate versus competitive debate, is that when I was judging for those outside organizations, I don't know those students. I'm never going to see them debate again. So that's one kind of assessment. But I like what you said about, we know our students, we've seen them debate before. We know how much they've improved. We know how to help them with the next thing. And that is very important what you said.
It's a gift. I think we can't always see our own progress. And so you can feel discouraged, even if you think, my youngest daughter really struggled with debate. It was really a high call for her to step up to that, to rise to that challenge, as Lee said. And the fact that she got to practice, and that she heard other mentors and parents who watched her speaking into her and encouraging her with the progress, that helped her see it too, and give her confidence. I'm grateful. Community is just the best.
It is. You're absolutely right. Well, Lee, we probably are going to need you to be the last word here, because we are actually out of time. I don't know how that happened, but it's true.
Yeah, so one thing, whether you're assessing the debate or a Latin translation or a math algorithm, just to keep in mind that there's always something for everybody. And the best assessment is when, like Brittany and you just said, you know your students. And so within the debate context, it might be a new student just introduces themselves, but your more experienced students do the cross-examines. And that student that's getting there might do the initial presentation where it's just a prepared speech. There's something for everybody. And so helping them to see what they can do well, and then that gives them the confidence to move on to the next thing, which I think is what the reason why we get together once a week with students, is so that they can not have lone school, but have school in such a way, education in such a way where they're learning community and they learn to serve the community. So thanks for being here with us, everybody.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. See you next time.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.